listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 176. I am your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is our editor-in-chief, Erik Anderson.
Hello.
And Sophia Ciminello.
Hi, everyone.
And Josh Parham.
Hello, hello. And
we are also joined by somebody brand new that has not been on the podcast with the new team and everything. He is going to be with us for a while now. You're stuck here. It's too late. The paperwork's been signed and everything, almost like a Michael Jordan Air sort of situation that we're talking about here. So all the expectations for our newest contributor here to the AW podcast and AwardsWatch.com, Zach Laws. Zach, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. And let me just say up front, my tenure here is still up to the check that you sent me clearing.
That's fair.
So, just as soon
as luck with that.
As soon as that's in the bank, then we can talk about my long-term plans. But
you got a check?
It's rubber, but yeah.
The air reference made me think you need some royalties for every single
big checks. I don't know if you're going to be able to take that to the bank. Like, it's a pretty big check, you know?
It's huge, yeah.
It's huge.
That's part of the problem. It's not fitting in my car.
I don't know how it's going to get through the door of the bank. You know what I mean? No, Zach, welcome to this madhouse that we call the AW podcast and this wonderful team. If you want, you can tell everybody a little bit about yourself up at the front. If you want to do it. If you don't, you want to keep the mystery alive, you can do that as well.
Well, yeah. What is there to say about me?
You like movies?
Yeah, I like movies.
Okay. You like awards?
Like awards.
You like TV?
I like television.
You like all the people that you're going to be talking with today?
Well,
okay, that's fair. I know where he's going. I'm setting myself up there.
No, I like all of you.
Did you have like a favorite film from last year?
A favorite film from last year. I mean, I don't know if I can remember that far back.
That's fair. Yeah, we kind of once the season's done, as you know, we just forget that any movie came out last year.
Now I remember Tar. That's what it was.
There you go.
Yes,
that's correct.
You'll fit in quite well here, Zach.
Yeah, this is the perfect space for you.
Tar country.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said it like that.
You said it with a real Southern twang.
The opposite of tar country.
Yeah, this is tar country.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me. You know, it's a nice little team you have on this Awards Watch, and so happy to be here. Thank you.
We are happy that you are here. We're happy that you're going to be with us over the rest of the year, the rest of the season, and be doing stuff with us online. So check that out when it drops on the website. As well as Zach will be here on the podcast doing stuff with us like we are today, because this is a big episode. It's the first time we've kind of, we're once again not doing a regular sort of Oscar episode because it's the off season or whatnot. I know there's a bunch of like can announcements like Killers of the Flower Moon and Indiana Jones and all that stuff. I could really care less about that. Those movies have not even premiered yet. It's not even the month that they're close to coming out just yet. We are here today, though, to talk about a big anniversary that is this year and a big anniversary film, and that is the Big Lebowski from the Coen Brothers. It is 25 years old. I couldn't even believe that when I saw that the other day, that it's 25 years old. And then we're going to do our top 5 Coen Brothers movies. Obviously, they're not together anymore. Thanksgiving's very awkward at their house right now. They're one of the great duos that ever did it, probably the greatest duo to ever do it behind the camera, and so we're going to talk about this maybe masterpiece that we all agree upon. So why don't we just jump right into it? Erik, you probably saw this movie when it was in theaters, right? Like opening weekend or whatnot.
Most
so
definitely I did.
You must have done a rewatch this week. Hopefully you did a rewatch this week. Hopefully everybody did a rewatch this week. But what were your thoughts when you first saw it and when it came out, and your thoughts on the Coen Brothers at the time, and what are your thoughts on the film now as it's aged 25 years young, unlike you?
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of waiting, really.
Yeah.
I kind of this was, obviously still in my early days, very, very early days of, awards watching. I was just a wee child, really. But no, I had always been a fan of theirs and kept wondering when they were going to be able to get, like real awards recognition. And then Fargo happened, and it was a big deal, and they kind of shot into, from the tours to very awards friendly. And then this was the very next thing that they did. And instead of like some directors that kind of, I think, feel they get a taste of awards season, and that part of it that they hadn't been a part of before might want to just try and keep that going. This was really the opposite of that, and it was more like in the Raising Arizona, just batshit kind of goofy, and really still one of the most quotable movies ever. And it's funny, this is a movie that feels sort of like in the weird canon of even something like Fight Club. It's a bro-y movie, it really is, but that has like never stopped me from absolutely loving it. I've seen it dozens of times, and I love it every time. Even if it didn't have Julianne Moore, it would
I was
still
gonna say,
be
when's she gonna get brought out of your mouth?
completely fucking amazing and wonderful. But because it is Julianne Moore, it's pretty perfect.
It's like the best movie ever made at that point, because it's got Julianne Moore in it. So
where's Maud's story? I want Maud's story.
Yeah, where's her spinoff? Because we had a spinoff from this. Let's not talk about that. We're not going to talk about that today. That's a bad movie. Zach, since you're new, we'll kick it over to you. Your thoughts on the Big Lebowski?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't see this movie when it first came out because I was 8 when it was in theaters, and a little young. The characters flipped me the bird. Said that. No, I saw it when I was a teenager and first started getting into movies, and at that point, the first Coen Brothers movie I saw was probably Fargo. As I'll talk about later on, it was a movie I became obsessed with and watched many, many, many times, and wanted to see everything else that they had done. And so I started catching up with everything that they had made up to that point. And this was before they'd even made No Country for Old Men. And so I saw The Big Lebowski around that time. And then I started watching it more and more as I became older, and when I went to film school. It was a movie that like all of my classmates adored. My friend Josh Ostrander could quote it from memory, every single line of it. And it just became one of those things that was in rotation for me over and over again. And I don't know that there's any movie that makes me laugh harder than this film. Even just like I rewatched it again yesterday, and it makes my cheeks hurt every time, and even just like recalling certain scenes from it make me laugh. So yeah, I mean, and to what Erik was talking about earlier, the thing that I've always really loved about the Coens is that they jump back and forth between these two modes of filmmaking. One is very austere and the other is very absurd. And, after having this great Oscar success with Fargo, this was looked at as very much of like a step backwards, right? Because it was like, shouldn't they be doing something that's more important? But we see now in retrospect that they were doing something that was important. It was something that was important to them, And I think that's the reason why this movie has endured so much, is that, it is just a lark, but it's more than that. And there's a lot that's going on underneath the surface of this film, as there is in all of their films, and especially in their comedies, right? And what I love about rewatching this movie, and especially on this rewatch, is finding all of these little layers that exist within the jokes and within the absurdity of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's such a layered comedy, and there's so much going on. That's why I love it so much too. And it plays so well on the rewatch because it's got so many jokes under the surface and right in front of you as well. Josh, not to age you, my friend. But where were you when you first saw the Big Lebowski? Was this like a high school sort of situation? Was it later? Was it earlier? Like, when did you first discover the Big Lebowski? I mean, obviously you probably discovered it because of the Coen Brothers, but when did you discover it? See it first.
My journey with this movie is actually kind of strange.
Ooh,
because
strange.
I was also a child when it first came out, so I didn't see it in theaters. But
Right.
I remember as a teenager hearing about it, but mostly hearing about it because it kind of became morphed into the whole like stoner comedies of especially the mid 2000s, which so many of them. And I wasn't a big fan of those kinds of comedies. And because it sort of had that perception, I didn't really find myself taking to the movie all that much. I kind of went in with a prejudgment. And the first time I saw it, I did not like The Big Lebowski, I have to admit. Took me a while to kind of turn around myself on that. And mostly that was because of the Coens, because I just love them so much. I think that they are brilliant directors. They are some of my favorite filmmakers working. And eventually I started to realize that this is more than just your typical stoner comedy. They're actually, like, the story that they're telling here is much more complicated than you would normally expect. And it kind of just has that layer on top of it. And I love the movie now. I think that it is very smart. It's incredibly funny. Every time I watch it, I do feel like there's something new to discover with it. And yeah, it's great. I love this movie so much.
Yeah. Sophia, Josh hit a point that I think a lot of people feel when they come to movies like this, is the preconceived notion or expectations. I was talking with somebody this week about they were watching the John Wick films this week for the first time. They'd never saw any of them, and they have this internet of buzz because like John Wick 4 is the greatest thing since sliced bread right now. And they watched the first two and they were like, what is the hype? So I mean, a movie like this that has a cult following and has prestigious directors behind it can leave you maybe a little bit cold on the first go round. So was that the case for you, or did you love it immediately and yeah, on the rewatch now it's like one of your favorites from this director duo?
Yeah. So I was 5 when this came out, so I didn't see it when it came out. I waited till a little bit later, but
Boo.
my relationships to this movie is kind of interesting because I also love the Coens. I'm from the Midwest, and I feel like they just understand that place so well. Our sense of humor, the sadness and how cold everything is and gray. They're so good with tone and balancing comedy, violence, the absurd, all of it. I love them so much. This movie, though, Josh, I think you hit the nail on the head. I assumed that this would be that stoner comedy that I wouldn't like. I was totally ready for it to be some sort of like Pineapple Express, Apatow thing. And I had seen Coen Brothers movies before and had loved them. And my parents were fans of the Coen Brothers. So it's sort of sad that I wrote it off. But, you know, when you're told as a teenage girl, like, this is a bro movie, this is the dorm room poster movie for stoner guys, you don't want to watch it. But I watched it. And it was really funny. I watched it at we would have these parties after swim meets in high school. And I watched it at a party and everyone was quoting it. And I just was so wrapped up in the dialogue and how hilarious this movie was. I loved all of the performances and these absolutely out there characters. And when it ended, I just could not stop thinking about how deep everything really was. And I tried to start explaining it to my friends. I was like, no, but the tumbleweed, everything is circular and it has all of these deep themes underneath it. It's so different than, you know, what people think it is. And it was such a nice surprise to me. And it really is, I think, one of my favorites, one of their best films, and one of the best comedic scripts maybe ever written.
Yeah, no, I agree. I echo everything that everyone's already said. I saw this movie when I was in high school. This movie came out when I was 6. It was not my first Coen Brothers movie. I think my first Coen Brothers movie was probably was probably, weirdly enough, it's one of their worst films. It was probably Intolerable Cruelty, because I saw that in the theater with my dad, because he just took me to it. And
Well, mine was a
so
lady killer, so
yeah,
mine was
so
worse.
yeah, like
Mine was also
God.
Intolerable Cruelty.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry for all of you.
And so I kind of, but then like as you got older, it's, I mean, No Country for Old Men is such a significant film for, I think, a lot of my generation, or most of our generation here. And that, because that 2007 year is such a like a key, just opening a door into cinema. And they're a big part of that. And so then I went back and started watching their films, and watched Fargo and Hudsucker and Barton Fink, all the films we'll be talking about probably on our lists and stuff. And this one was always the one I would put off. So Sophia does this thing, and I know Sophia, she likes to savor her director. She doesn't like to just watch everything all at once. And so this was, so I sympathize with you, as you've not watched all of Robert Altman's films, because this was like the last film.
I'm
really
hanging on to
like,
Popeye.
she's hanging on to Popeye for great movie. And I was just waiting to kind of watch this and be in the right mood, not like high or anything, just being like, okay, I know that I gotta really be in the mood for this because so many people love it. And I was kind of with Josh a little bit. The first time I watched it, I was like a little bit like, okay, what is this thing? And like, I was trying to get into it, but I knew it was funny, and I knew I was vibing with most of it. It didn't 100% click. So a couple years later, in college, watching it, just put it on, and I was like, well, I haven't got anything to do. Maybe I'll give it another go. And it just worked, and it's worked ever since. And it's a movie that's, I think as you get older, it gets better with you, because of just, the comedy is sharper, and you notice things more. You notice the insane choices that this movie makes at times. Like I love, obviously one of my favorite actors is Philip Seymour Hoffman. And when I first watched this film, I'm like, what the hell is he doing? But now I'm like, I'm sitting here today rewatching this movie going, why didn't he make another Coen Brothers movie? Why didn't he get to give more performances like this? Because he's perfect for their world. He is absolutely perfect and fits so well in there. And then obviously like Goodman and Moore and Buscemi, they worked with them. But then like Bridges gives this just titanic comedic performance. It's so comfortable. He makes in a giant persona literally almost the rest of his life feel like the dude. And yet
A lot of guys made this their persona for the rest of their lives too.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, it could be a lot worse personas out there. I mean, you mentioned Fight Club. We could have had a lot more of that rather than the dude. So,
Better that than Walter Sobchak, I would say.
that's
Or like Anton Chigurh.
yeah, exactly. I think that like just a lazy stoner is fine. But like, yeah, it's if you're gonna pick a movie persona, I guess. But I don't know. This movie just makes me laugh. It's very much I think it's a vibes movie. You got to really feel it. You got to really go on this ride with them. It's kind of insane. It's one of those also too where it's kind of hard to explain really the journey of this movie from where it starts to where it ends. Like obviously like like the shot above like behind me, it's like you could say, oh, because of the trailer it's like at a bowling alley, and you're like, yeah, it's got a couple scenes there, but that's not the whole aesthetic of this thing. And it's just it really is truly one of the best comedies of the 90s and maybe of all time, just because of how sharp and I mean, some of the dialogue hasn't aged particularly well, but overall, I mean, but that's just how it goes. But overall, it's structured so perfectly that I rewatched this thing way too many times because I think about the Coen Brothers, and honestly, this is one of the first things that comes to mind is a movie like this, because I believe it was Sophia or maybe it was Josh that said, like, tonally speaking, they are the masters of tone and being able to balance that throughout, their crime films mixed with this dark comedy in there all the time. Like even a movie that is very bleak, like No Country for Old Men, I laugh way too much during that movie because of specific things that are very unique to the region, and they're so detailed for those places that people that are in and around or know those areas, they can find themselves very immersed into it. So yeah, this movie rules. I like this movie a lot. So
Yeah, it's much more complicated than you would think it is, which makes it so weird that it did get kind of lumped into the old stoner comedies of like those other lazy movies. Because if you like really take a step back, this thing has an actual like 1940s detective kind of plot to it, where it is actually rather complicated and you have to pay attention. You can't really just zone out and smoke weed when you watch this movie if you want to know what's going on in it.
I think
Speaking from experience, Josh? Or
no comment.
Okay, all right.
I do think, though, that the brilliant thing that this movie pulls off is that you can actually get stoned and watch it and still appreciate it, because
Speaking from experience.
I said I watched it a lot in college.
That is true. That is true.
But it's because of like the sheer density of the jokes within each of the scenes. Like there's word gags, there's sight gags, there's physical comedy, there's multiple jokes within the same scene going, on and going one on top of the other, right? It's a very layered movie in that way. And so you pick up on things that you might have missed the first couple of times, right? And because like the plot really, for as complex as the plot is, it really is kind of nonsense, right? And that's the thing with like, most detective films too from the 40s. Like there's that famous story of when they were writing the script for The Big Sleep. I think it was William Faulkner who said, like, who killed this guy? And no one could answer it as they were writing the script, and
that's true.
Like it kind of gives it away with like the Sam Elliott opening monologue where he's the voiceover where he's setting up and then he's like, well, I lost my train of thought there for a second,
Which is just like a perfect performance too. Like it just, I mean, I love Sam Elliott. His like sort of sprinkled in narration, but then also like being inside the story as well. Ordner a sarsaparilla, you know what I mean? And just and be like, you're pretty cool. You just curse a lot. And then the line of like, what the fuck does that mean? You know what I mean? I love all that within there. Yeah, this noir that's sort of just like within the first 20 minutes too, or 30 minutes of the film, like John Goodman saying like, well, you had a hunch she was planning this, or that she'll, be home, and yet you get wrapped up in it because you're like, no, that can't be that simple. And then the movie is like, no, it was that simple. It's just, go with that gut instinct, even though like most of their instincts in the film result in like deaths and explosions and new rugs and all this different stuff. Sophia,
I love that their love of noir and the 40s is not just limited to their movies that take place in that time and that sort of feel closer and adhere to those genres, but are really in so many of their films. Their heart is almost always there, whether it's this or Fargo or Hudsucker. It's always there. And I think that's one of the things that makes them so interesting, is that their films are almost never just one thing. So reducing it to a stoner comedy is kind of crazy because it's so much more than that. And I think it's kind of why too it's allowed itself to have such a broader cult status than simply being that. Because if you're going to compare it to things like from the 2000s, then those movies were inspired by this and not kind of the other way around.
No, I agree.
But often when you're a certain age and you discover a director or a group of directors, the order in which you watch things is going to be different. And like you were talking about earlier, right, the hype of something can be very different for your experience than in an era where there wasn't that. It's probably the one thing, or the main thing I miss from the pre-social media era, is that it was really difficult to be overhyped by something.
You kind of like
so you kind of all discovered it
together. Or you went to a party and somebody said, "Hey, you should watch this thing." You might.
It was just really that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you would have people that were absolute, evangelists for a movie like this, or anything that sort of has like a cult status.
Yeah, I mean, like it did fine at the box office, but it wasn't like a hit or anything, and it was perceived okay. I think also too the fact that it was following up Fargo, which won
and
Oscars.
To Zach's point, it absolutely was seen as a downturn.
Yeah, like, oh my God, they
Fargo.
Then how quickly they climb and how quickly they fall, sort of situation.
It really was.
Yeah, but
legacy tells a totally different story.
Yeah, as Lydia Tarr says, time is the real thing. You know what I mean? And we're talking about it 25 years later. So there you go. Sophia, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I love the Sam Elliott inclusion, because that also brings in their love of Westerns. I think it gives it this Western-like quality, and they're so good at it's sort of fascinating how they put so many period details in the film, specifically also what my king Roger Deakins does. I have to bring him up, of course, but they bring up so many period details, right? You have Vietnam, you have this sort of like Gulf War, you have the 70s hippie, you have the 40s noir. And because of this, it creates a sort of timelessness for the movie, which is really brilliant. And I think that's part of the reason why people from so many different generations love this movie, and why it's had the legacy that it's had and has created this cult status. And earlier we said it's a little bit convoluted and how the plot doesn't really matter necessarily. And I think that the Coens, they love ambiguity and they never explain things. And I think sometimes they're a little cheeky when they say like, oh, it doesn't have meaning under it. Just take it for what it is. If you want to watch this movie and take it as a movie about bowling or a movie about a rug or a movie about money, you can do that. And I think it's still an enjoyable movie. But when you dig under all of those symbols and themes that they've created with this script, that's when it becomes, I think, the more enriching watch. And that comes from multiple viewings, which this film is just so rewatchable. I feel like it's not my most rewatched Coen movie, that's Fargo, but I think that for a lot of people, this would be the number one most rewatchable.
Yeah. And just its style too. Erik, you were talking about like influences a couple of years ago, and was it David Robert Mitchell's Under the Silver Lake? When I was watching that film, I was like, oh my God, he's really just trying to go for the Big Lebowski here, isn't he? He's just trying to kind of create that sort of vibe. And you see this movie just kind of drenched everywhere. And then, of course, obviously, we haven't really, I mean, we've mentioned them. I've sort of mentioned them and everything, but then you have those iconic moments with this cast that, like, it feels just like also to this lightning in a bottle of having all these great actors that, again, like to even just have like Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's mostly a Paul Thomas Anderson sort of stand, come in here, do like 2 scenes, knock it out of the park. Turturro coming in here, which Turturro's like, I
love Turturro in this.
He's so good in this. It's a very creepy character to begin with, very weird. And also too, like, he kind of, as much as the dude grew a persona, he grew a persona off of this too. Of this really like kind of cool, weird character. And I always forget he's in it like maybe 5 minutes, if not even that much. Like he's just kind of like a blip on the radar. But then you have like, again, John Goodman, who's just absolutely fantastic in this. Like,
should have been Oscar nominated.
Should have been, but then
should have won, in my opinion.
8-year-olds, dude.
Yeah.
But then every time he would just tell Buscemi, "Shut the fuck up, Donnie." Like every time, it kills me.
The best running gag of the movie, and
Buscemi's face every time.
It gets like such a tragic, and it's oh my God, there is nothing like more Coen Brothers than that.
It's tragic, but then I love like Sam Elliott at the end. He's just like, yeah, I didn't really see Donnie going. I didn't really like that part of the story, but oh well, new kids coming in, so one in, one out, and it's so hilarious and it's so insane. I mean, just the money gag situation, the ashes, all of it. It's such a wild, silly movie too.
Well, that's also the other element of the Coen brothers or Coen brother.
Well, I mean,
that is the use of a narrator like that, which is kind of a classically kind of thing. And then that also has permeated several of their films, sometimes literally directly, and then other times just in mood and style. They dip their toes into so many different things while still absolutely being identifiable as themselves. And that is really, really hard, because you can be a great director but build a canon that is sort of just homage to something else all the time. And then it's like, where are you actually you in this? And it's never not them, ever.
Yeah.
Well, I'm okay, except for maybe a certain block post Lebowski, but yeah.
Yeah, where they were like, where are you guys? The Hollywood machine era.
Yeah, they just got to that later, just
Yeah.
a little bit later than I think people expected, because that first 7 film run of them, I'm sorry, but I'll take that almost over anybody.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Spoiler alert for Eric's
spectacular.
list. Well, does anybody else have anything else to say? You got more stuff to say about this film before we get to top 5s? I know that there's probably like tons of things. People got tons of notes. I can see Sophia's face. She's like, I got a ton of notes over here still.
I always have so many notes.
I don't have like any notes for my top 5. I only just have like,
oh, great. He's going to go 45 minutes on each pick. Yeah.
I would like to say that in the 10 years that I've lived in Los Angeles, this movie hits a lot differently, just like that. I think that's one of the secret weapons of this movie, is that it's so specifically about living in Los Angeles. Like, I've been to the In-N-Out on Radford, not because I wanted to do a tourist trip, but just because it was there and I was hungry. The diner that he and Walter eat at, where they're discussing the toe, is across the street from the Academy Museum, and
oh my god,
in the restaurant there, the opening where he's going to Ralph's. I've gone to Ralph's late at night because I needed one thing. So yeah, I mean, that's I just there's a lot to talk about it, but I think that's the thing that really jumped out to me every time I watch it. Now that I live out here, it's just like, I can understand how people can become the dude. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Like,
all you got to do is go pick up some milk and make a White Russian.
Yeah. So
half and half. Yeah.
I in this rewatch last week, because like I said, I've seen it many, many, many times, but it never really quite clicked for me until this last time, that the guys that come, the Treehorn guys that come to rough up Lebowski, both hot as fuck, by the way. Mark Pellegrino, Flood Moon, holy shit, Eiffel Tower.
Okay. All right. Get to your
but
point.
I didn't register this, and I don't know why, because my fucking radar is always on.
Yeah.
But they switch clothes the second time that they're there versus the first time. So in my mind, they are absolutely fucking each other.
A great way to wrap up this discussion, I think.
Wow.
Very compelling
that was
evidence.
my big takeaway on the most recent screening.
And Erik was high when he was to figure that out during.
I'm always looking for gay shit.
Yeah, I know you are. Yeah. Just look at your Twitter timeline.
On a little bit more serious note, I suppose, I was going to mention the Busby Berkeley inspired dream sequence, which I think is a very creative choice for the Coens. And when directors do something like that feels so different, but also very grounded in the reality and in the world of this film, I just love it every time. I think the choreography is great, and I love Deakins, his work there. Some of the most iconic shots, I think, in the Coen's filmography.
Yeah, just and then like Julianne Moore's outfit and all that. It's literally
Yes.
like one of the posters.
And that
she's-
song just perfect.
Mhm.
and Bridges dancing. I mean, it's all it's one of those scenes where, like, you know, every movie like this, Josh, you mentioned, like, it gets categorized as a stoner film, and there's a drug sequence or something like that, or something out of this world in a movie, and those feel so tedious, and they don't feel like they're inventive, or like you're saying, Sophia, they don't feel like real within this world, or they feel like they're just like grabbing all this weird crap that come out of nowhere, and it just feels like, no, it's actually like one of the best parts, because like you feel them creatively being like, we're making deliberate choices in this space, while also having the aesthetic and everything we've seen before, and having it feel, you feel it, you feel Lebowski, you feel the dude in that moment and how he's feeling, and they're just able once again to balance that whole tone of that scene within the rest of this movie, and it doesn't feel like it's out of place, you know, which I really admire.
Yeah. I love that moment. The other moment I really love too is right before, when the dude sees Jackie Treehorn write something down, and he leaves, and he goes up and he does the trick with the pencil, and just sees this very strange doodle, and we never get any explanation from it. And I feel like that's this movie. Like, it gives you the mystery elements to follow, but they're nonsense. you know, and you just have to kind of go with the nonsense. And that's one of the very charming things about this movie.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, well, anything else? No, say your piece, Sophia. She's got like 9 more notes.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm ready for the top 5.
All right, so our top 5s. We're gonna do this as effectively as possible. We're gonna go Sophia, Josh, Zach, Erik, then myself. If somebody picks a film, we'll talk about those picks. We'll say what pick it is for us all at that time, just to save you guys on the listener end not hearing us talk about a movie 7 times, it feels like. But anyway, so Sophia, kick it off with you. What's your number 5? Oh, and did you have like criteria? Did you rewatch a lot of stuff this week? Did you know, was it a difficult list to put 5 together here?
It wasn't too difficult for me, because I have 3 that I knew had to be on this list that are in my list of all-time favorite films by any director, period, and that had like a really strong importance to me when they first came out or when I first visited them. And then my 4 and 5 spots were a little bit looser, where I could have seen a number of films going into those slots, really, but I didn't really have criteria. I think I just went with films that I think work for me in every way. They have so many movies that I love, but films that really work for me and that I think say something about their filmography, and I really go to the writing a lot. I think they're incredible writers, and they somehow, I know they're considered to be one of the greatest filmmaking duos. I don't necessarily think they get enough credit for how strong they are as writers.
Yep. No, for sure. So your number 5?
So my number 5, I'm curious if this is on anyone's list, is Barton Fink. I love this movie deeply. Just, I think what it has to say about writing and about the process of writing, but also of the difference between like highbrow art, lowbrow art, the contrast between New York and LA is really interesting, and in how that's depicted in the film. John Turturro, again, he's fantastic in this movie. And this is Roger Deakins, his first collab with the Coens, so that felt important for me to put here. But it's almost like seeing into the Coens' souls in a way. We're really getting a look at their brain and understanding their brains, plural, right? Not just one brain, even though we think that sometimes. Seeing what they think about Hollywood and about LA. That has always stuck with me about this movie. It's a weird one, and I completely understand if people don't love it as much or don't love it on the first go, but it's one that has, I think, proven to be more enriching as I've rewatched. So, Barton Fink.
Anybody else have this on their list?
Yes, I do.
Yep.
Might be my number. I'll say it's my number 4. So
Okay.
It is my number 4 as well.
All right. All right.
It's probably my 6,
Okay.
but it could just as easily be a 4.
I'll echo everything that Sophia just said, and I'll say that for me, this is the Coens, blending both their talent for the absurd and also the austere within the same film. And, to the point about the performances, they create such interesting characters in all of their films. It would be very difficult for any actor to mess that up. I really appreciate the apocalyptic view that they have of Los Angeles, and just how willing they are to leave reality behind and create this sort of dreamlike world or nightmarish world that is also very much rooted in a meticulous recreation of 1940s Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're so good at just like placing you in a very specific time and place. And to your other point, Sophia, I actually have a copy of the script for Barton Fink. So yeah, I appreciate them as writers, and their scripts are like publishable as books.
I love that this is the movie that broke the Cannes Film Festival.
Yes.
And forever changed their award system because it won like the 3 top awards. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Josh, why do you love it?
I mean, all that was previously said, I do love this examination of just the creative process to begin with and how much it just takes from you. And then you have to hand it off to somebody who will make it and will just crush your soul. There's a moment towards the end that I don't know if I want to get into so much just in case somebody hasn't seen it, but essentially a confrontation about kind of who owns a writer's ideas once they go out to Hollywood and how you can just kind of get stuck there and not making anything. And they have the power to do that. Even if you have this ability to create and this want to create, I find that to be the perfect pessimism of the Coen brothers often. And the crafts too are just so incredible. I mean, apart from, the Oscar nominated crafts like the production design and costumes and all that, the sound is also so meticulous in this movie and so necessary to get you in this hellscape, essentially. I think this movie is just so well put together, but also like so much of their stuff has a lot to say about kind of very personal things in their lives as well. And yeah, it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it is my number 6. So it's just right outside the good old top 5. Josh, we'll kick it right back over to you. Your number 5.
My number 5 is True Grit.
Oh,
Ooh.
okay.
Yeah. Which this was actually not my number 5 initially, but after rewatching the movie that was my number 5, I kind of decided that I didn't like it quite as much as I remembered. And True Grit is a movie that I think is very easy to just label as it's a remake, and a remake of a movie that not a lot of other people like, and it might be better, but maybe doesn't do anything all that interesting. But sort of as we kind of have been saying, there's sort of a surface level to a lot of Coen stuff, but once you dig beneath the surface, it has so much more to say. And I find the same thing with True Grit. I think it has a lot to say about America at this particular time and sort of the relationship between these generational figures. And I mean, the performances from every single member of the cast is just incredible. Haley Steinfeld, like one of the greatest debuts ever put to film. And yeah, I kind of feel like Jeff Bridges has basically stolen Rooster Cogburn to just put into every performance since then. I don't care because he's so good. Even Matt Damon is good. Come on.
I was going to say Matt Damon's really good.
Damon performance.
Yeah. Matt Damon's really good in that movie.
I love this movie. It's beautifully shot too. Like one of the greatest looking movies that Deakins has shot for them, which is already a very high bar to clear. And yeah, this is a movie that I really liked the first time I saw it, but kind of dismissed it as it was just enjoyable. But I think it actually does have a lot to say, and I think it's just beautiful.
I love that movie. I remember seeing that twice in the theaters, and that shot of Bridges with Steinfeld on the horse as he's trying to save her arm, it's just it's what a beautiful shot. But yeah, it's such a like a Coen Brothers way of making a remake and elevating it and making it better, because you just get so empathetic with those characters. And yes, Jeff Bridges is insanely over the top in that movie, but it balances out Haley Steinfeld's performance, and then Matt Damon somewhere in the middle, and then you have Brolin come in for like 3 scenes, and he's really good. It's a really darkly funny film too, and it's miles better than the original. Yeah,
it has one of my favorite gags ever in one of their movies, which is towards the beginning during the hanging scene, where there's 3 guys, there's 2 white guys and 1 Native American, and they let the 2 white guys have their final words. And they go to the Native American and they don't even let him speak. They just put the hood on. And I remember when I saw it, the first time I saw it with a crowd, obviously they get to laugh. It's very funny. The very next moment, they pull the lever and then they're violently hanged, and the tone just switches completely. But that's the Coens right there. They can put in those 2 very contradictory tones together and reveal something that you were kind of laughing at, something that was incredibly morbid to begin with, and makes you think about it too. And I absolutely love it. It to me, it's very indicative of a lot of the tone of that movie, and I think it's so well done.
Yeah. Anybody else have this on their list? Honorable mentions probably are all around.
Yeah, it'd be in my top 10. It's very hard for me to narrow down a top 5 for these guys, because I've made so many films that I've watched over and over and over again. And I say that I was in film school when True Grit came out, and the kind of thinking around campus was, well, it's lesser Coens, right? But I think that as time has gone on, it's grown, and it could very easily be in my top 5 of their films.
Well, yeah. Speaking of your number 5, Zach.
Oh yeah. Well, my number 5 is Blood Simple. I'm sure that the Coens have made better movies than this since then, but why I feel it deserves special inclusion is because it's very rare for somebody with their first film to make something that is still so iconic. And, because most first movies are sort of like a test subject or a warm-up for what people are going to do later on. Maybe they don't even know what kinds of filmmakers they want to be when they make their first film. But these guys from the very beginning understood what they wanted to do. This movie combines 2 kinds of filmmaking that they would often return to, noir and westerns, right? Not 2 genres that often go together, but they put them together beautifully. They create such memorable characters. Emmett Walsh, Dan Hedaya, both of whom should have won the supporting actor Oscars for those years. Frances McDormand, from the very beginning, an important collaborator. And they also have, working on a very small budget, such a mastery of style. The cinematography by Barry Sonnenfeld is beautiful and inventive. The score by Carter Burwell is fantastic. And so I think that, it would be in my top 5 just because, it's so impressive to me that these guys were able to so assuredly put their stamp on. These are the kinds of filmmakers we are. We're going to play around with genre. We're going to make films about people who are doomed by one bad decision and get in deeper and deeper and deeper. We're going to be funny. We're going to be quirky. And, we're going to wrap it all into this, this one neat little package. So yeah, it's my number 5.
Yeah, I love that pick. Erik, looks like you might have that in your list.
It is also my number 5.
There we go.
I think this was not the first Coen Brothers I saw, but I'm pretty sure it was the second. Everything from Raising Arizona on I saw in order. So I did see this after, and for all the exact same reasons that Zach states, this was such an establishing first film. It's so rustic. It reminds me of Evil Dead
Mm.
in a way where
Well, that makes sense.
You could tell that it was like kind of done on the cheap, but sort of on the fly, but you could see everything that these directors were going to be in the future from it.
It makes sense, Erik, because Sam Raimi and the Coens were like roommates at the time.
It does kind of. Yeah. It does feel like in that sort of bro-y filmmaker mode of like, we're all friends because we kind of want to do,
we all know what
sort of things.
Yeah, we all feel the same problems and everything, and can throw three things off of each other and whatnot.
I do think I also agree with Zach. I think Emmett Walsh is insanely good in this. It's kind of funny that as they sort of became known for reusing, people, the same cast over and over again, or like populating them throughout, there isn't too much from this. I mean, for instance, McDormand, it was her first, and Holly Hunter has a voice cameo, but it's not really like it really sits outside of a lot of their films, I think. And I just think it's such a insane first movie. Yep. I love it.
In my top 10, just not in the top 5. So, but a movie I really love, and also great Criterion restoration. I will say that. Good job there by them. All right, my number 5 is a film that nobody has mentioned. I don't know if it'll be on anybody else's list. I'm curious to see if it will be. It's their 2009 film, A Serious Man. A movie that I remember seeing in the theaters and I thought was absolutely hilarious, and very deeply personal film. Coen Brothers being Jewish filmmakers, really establishing this grief of Larry Gopnik, that's sort of kind of creeping in, and the existential dread that he has, in an all-time performance for Michael Stuhlbarg, who is just incredible, and it fits right into their vulnerable lead protagonist who has just like everything going wrong against them the entire time, and it's actually not almost like a historical reason why behind it. And I think that screenplay, which was the other only thing that it was nominated for, screenplay and picture that year, in that expanded lineup, is pretty damn great. And there's so many lines in that movie that I just remember. Santana Abraxas. I never listened to Santana Abraxas. Like it's hilarious movie. And a movie also too that, like, when I first saw it, like the ending kind of was like, what the hell is this? And as time has gone on, that ending has evolved, and it's beautiful. And talk about like that sequence in the end, the way Deacon shoots it. It's absolutely incredible. The opening 10 minutes of this too, which is almost like a horror movie. Almost, it feels like at times, the way that they're setting it all up. It's great. I don't know why people don't talk about it enough. I think because of the fact that, it comes in an era of some other films that we talk about and whatnot, or people kind of think of it's a little bit lesser because it didn't have the box office cachet or hasn't carried on. But Stuhlbarg's great in this. Fred Malid, who plays Cy Abelman, is incredible in this.
Cy Abelman?
Yeah. Incredible. Richard Kind as his brother, who is like trying to like steal channels or whatever, and then like the FBI comes to his. Hilarious. Just so much, like, once again, layered comedically, beautifully, but also very personal to them as well. And kind of weirdly, like, a little bit, it feels like about their lives or their childhood or what they were growing up, and doing it before everyone else thought it was cool. So A Serious Man, a movie I really, really enjoy. Anybody else have this? Sophia, I think you do, right?
It's my number 4, so it's like a perfect
perfect segue.
transition there. Yeah, I love A Serious Man, and you talked about like their Jewish identity and their Midwestern roots. I feel like this is sort of the perfect backdrop for that, and I agree. I think that the prologue, like the beginning of this movie, is such a risk that they really pull off well, and I love the Michael Stuhlbarg performance as well. I think that he is great as Larry Gopnik, who is just this sort of like Midwestern everyman. And my favorite shot, so in addition to what you said, Ryan, my favorite moment in the movie is when we have Larry Gopnik up at the chalkboard and he's just writing out all of these equations, and it's the uncertainty theory that he's talking about. And the camera pulls out and you see him as this just little small man with this giant chalkboard that is just covered in things that we do not understand, formulas, mathematical equations. And he says shortly after, the uncertainty principle proves we can't ever really know what's going on. And that to me is like a core tenet of Coen Brothers filmmaking. So yeah, I love this film.
Yeah. Anybody else have it?
Agree. It is my number 3 on my list.
Okay.
I love this movie so much and agree with everything that's been said. I just feel like this movie has so much to say just about their own philosophy of life, that there are all of these mysteries that we try very hard to understand, and we can get close sometimes, but other times you literally just have to accept the mystery as what is literally said in the movie. And it feels so Jewish, yes, but at the same time, it also is just so kind of universally relatable in terms of trying to just survive the torments of life. I feel like it's sort of well known that the story is kind of inspired by the Book of Job, and you definitely feel it. And I just think that's a brilliant kind of framework to hang this on. And just the only other thing I would mention is top tier Carter Burwell score too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Also the True Grit score. You mentioned True Grit, loving that one. I love that one too.
He's in like peak form during this era.
Yeah. I love A Serious Man. I do think it's a masterpiece from them.
Yeah. All right.
It's one of those, it's just right out of my top 5.
Just right out.
My favorite movie of the year when it came out. And what I love about it is that it came in the time where they were making these they just won the Oscar for No Country. They were making these films that were filled with movie stars and adapted from books, and for them to work on a much smaller, I think the reason why people undervalue it is because they're working on a much smaller scale than they had maybe since like the beginning of their career. Doing a film without movie stars, and doing something that is probably the most nakedly personal film they've ever made. I think all their films are personal in some way, but this one being so much about their upbringing, and it's a masterpiece. It pains me not to have it in the top 5, but they've made so many great movies that any of them could be there.
Erik, we're going to kick it back over to you because we've already heard from Josh and Zach about their number 4s, which was Barton Fink. So your number 4.
My number 4 is Raising Arizona, which is the Big Lebowski before the Big Lebowski.
That's fair.
Really in exactly the same vein, but equal if not better. Well, obviously better. I think it's better. Spoiler alert. And like I mentioned, I think it was the first that I saw. I think I was 16. I think it is so impossibly goofy in being like Lebowski, a guy that just keeps getting into more and more trouble the further he goes and faster. It's one of my all-time favorite Holly Hunter performances. I'm obsessed with their naming, speaking of their writing, just the names of everybody in this, from Ed to High, it's so silly. I think it is, I don't know how or why they thought that essentially kind of like a Road Warrior type style parody was going to be like the framework of it, but it's freaking hilarious. And jumping from Blood Simple to this is insane, because then you have other movies down the line that sort of are like perfect combinations of both of them, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I don't know. Even if it's not as quotable as Lebowski, and I don't think I've watched it nearly as much, it's like a lot of their early films, just more imprinted on me. I think it's the second hottest Nicolas Cage has ever been. Good Lord.
What's number
It's
one?
the hair.
It's the hair that keeps changing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Eric, what's number one?
the number one hottest Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, you just said second, so you have to say what.
Moonstruck.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, you
That's
have to put it on the
that's-
record. You have to
that's
put it
not
on the
up for
record.
debate.
Well, you can't lead the listeners. They're gonna like, put it up to their own minds. They can,
In that T-shirt with next to the thing in the.
I agree, but I'm helping the
even
listener.
close.
I'm helping the listeners out. I'm thinking of them.
Anyway, yes, I could listen to Holly Hunter say "turn to the right" like 1,000 times and laugh every time. I think she's amazing. Everybody's great in it. Frances McDormand in that horrible wig.
John
John
Goodman.
Goodman again.
Mhm.
My God, probably the most stable player I think that they ever used.
Anybody else have this on their list?
I wish I did. It's one of my favorite films of theirs and one of my favorite comedies. Much like Big Lebowski, very few movies make me laugh as hard as this film. Just, and I do love the fact that this was their follow-up to Blood Simple, right? From the beginning, they said, we're going to just, we got two modes of filmmaking here, and we're not going to apologize for loving our screwball comedy homages.
That yodeling like theme, oh my God. That probably pops into my head randomly more than almost anything in their entire canon at the strangest times.
All right. Oh, Sophia, did you have something? No. Okay. My number 4 is The Big Lebowski. If you want to hear my thoughts about that, rewind back to about 30 minutes ago when we were talking about it. All right. Anybody else have The Big Lebowski obviously on their list? Anybody?
It's in my top 10, but not in my 5.
That's a no.
Same.
That's a no.
My number 3.
You're number 3. All right.
And I'll just add to the thing that we talked about earlier. I think what makes this movie more than just like a cult classic for me is that there's this, and it really resonated for me on this rewatch. There's this sense of doom and dread and the existence of death that hangs in this movie that I think a lot of people don't give it credit for. The randomness of life, as Sam Elliott is talking about, it's like, I hate to see Donnie go, but hey, there's another little Lebowski on the way. That's just how it goes. And so I just, I would add that to it. Like, also like setting it during the Gulf War and having Vietnam vet Walter echoing lots of things that President Bush said, like this aggression will not stand. They're talking about a rug. And, the constant theme that runs through their work of like a person making one bad decision and it just totally destroying their life. Like there's a line that Jeff Lebowski says, or the dude, I should say, says, where he's like, I could just be sitting here with pee stains on my rug were it not for you. And it's like, that line just sums up what makes this movie so great, is that like, it just, you decided to try to get retribution for something and you got in too deep.
Honestly, also, yeah. And also too, and I didn't mention this during the review, but also a key collaboration that I believe started here, which is their work with T-Bone Burnett, sort of curating their music, and they've had a a fascinating and great relationship with them, obviously having much success with a couple of their films. So some of those films may or may not be talked about today. We'll never know. All right. So that's my number 4. That's Zach's number 3. That's Big Lebowski. So we're back to Sophia for your number 3.
My number 3, I can't believe it's as low as my number 3 because it's a perfect movie and one that I too am obsessed with, and it's Fargo.
Yeah.
I love Fargo so much. The character of Marge Gunderson is so pitch perfect, and I think it's a miracle that Frances McDormand has a Best Actress Oscar for this. One of my favorite wins in the category's history. Just such an original character and performance that we just don't see that often in that category, frankly. I think that this is it's a razor sharp tale, and it's a perfect blend of drama and comedy. It's a pitch black comedy, and it's a tone that is completely theirs, and they've mastered it by this film. My favorite thing that the Coens say about Fargo and what they say about this location is that it's Siberia with family restaurants. I think that is the perfect way
Those diner
to
clubs.
describe being there in Minnesota, just like, oh, and like filming there and seeing that ice. And it's just, I think it's one of those films that it is just as good as everyone says it is. And that is something that I feel like, I don't know, it's what else is there to say about Fargo? A million and one things, but it's sort of this perfect nightmarish noir film that happens to also be a comedy. Yeah. I'm sure other people have it, so I'm going to retire.
It's my number 1.
Yeah.
No, it's Josh's number 1.
I mean, it's my number 1 too. So
yeah, and I know it's
one.
boring to say Fargo's the number 1, but like, it is perfect. It really is, and it's perfect literally from the first frame, where we get the text telling us that this is based on a true story, and it's not. It's completely fabricated, but that is the entire point of the movie. The point of the movie is not taking things at face value, always questioning things, and often those who you would assume would be so carefree and aren't paying attention. Like, as much as we do love Marge, when you first meet her, you think incompetent sheriff of this small town who doesn't know what she's doing, and she's literally the smartest one in the room. Like, she even goes through a process of kind of understanding that, no, you do have to dig deeper. Like, the diner scene that she has with Mike is incredible. I love that moment, not only just because it's so funny, but it once again shows her that, like, you can't just take things that people tell you on face value. That's the reason why she goes back to the car lot again to ask him more questions. And I think that movie is absolutely 100% masterpiece, brilliant. It's so smart. All of those performances are great. Yeah, it's my number 1 for a reason. Because I do think it is their best film.
Zach?
It's my number 3.
Oh, it's your number 3 too. All right.
But
it's my number 3 as well.
It could just as easily be number 1. It is easily my most watched Coen Brothers movie. I don't think they have a single movie in their entire canon that is the exact Venn diagram of the noir thriller and the absurd comedy. This is Blood Simple meets Big Lebowski. It's like the thugs in Lebowski sort of become like main characters, and we get actually a whole story of what those kind of guys are like. I think I totally agree with you, Sophia. This win is historically for McDormand so amazing and feels like implausible, but totally happened. I think my 2 favorite moments, I don't even know if I would call them favorite moments, but the things that I think about the most when just thinking about it right now is that second visit to Jerry Lundegaard, and when she really puts all the pieces together, and you can see it in her face. You know exactly that she knows, but he doesn't quite like really know that she. I just love how subtle and careful she conveys that, and that they allow it to happen rather than, you know, it feel bigger than it is. But then also too, the whole abduction and everything at Lundergaard's with Jean is genuinely really horrible and scary and violent, not in a wood chipper kind of funny way, but in a really like genuinely terrifying way.
And it happens in the middle of the day too, and you can see everything. And
yeah,
the
things
bright
that happen
lights,
in the day, things that happen in the daytime are so much scarier than night. But again, just the way that they are so careful to balance that, so that it's not wood chipper funny, but it is really, this is kind of like the core of why story is happening, and gives it enough weight. And I don't know, they know their shit.
Yeah. Zach, it's your number one, right?
Yeah. So this is one of those movies that I saw at a very formative time in my life when I was first starting to get into movies. And it was one of it made me want to devote my life to filmmaking. And I saw it for the first time. This is how old I am. I rented it on a VHS tape from the library.
Yeah.
This is before it was even on DVD.
Yeah.
I had it for 7 days and I watched it 8 times in those 7 days.
8 times?
Yeah. Didn't have a lot to watch back then, you know.
Well, you made sure it wasn't 7 or 9. You made sure it was 8. You wanted to be even. Yeah, that's fair.
And I can't tell you why I watched it that many times in that short amount of period, other than the fact that, you know, when you're growing up, you watch the stuff that your parents are watching or that your parents give to you, right? Most of it is like movies for kids, movies that follow a very kind of like set pattern of like what a movie can be or what a movie is supposed to be. And Fargo was one of the first times I realized, oh, you can color outside of the lines. A movie can be anything that you want it to be. If you're a good enough director, or in this case, directors, you can balance tone in such a way that you can have like genuinely terrifying moments, like that home abduction, mixed with something that's like, you know, in the very middle of it, Peter Stormare's taking off his mask and gloves and saying, "I need unguip," right? Like just this incredibly silly thing that makes you want to laugh in the midst of this horrifying moment, right? Or the scene where they get pulled over by the cop, they've abducted Jane, and Steve Buscemi turns to her in the back and says, "You know, keep quiet back there, lady, or else they're gonna have to, you know, shoot you." Like, that's a horrifying thing to think about, right? But what really makes this an all-timer for me, I always think about what Roger Ebert wrote about this film in his Great Movies Review. Marge Gunderson comes into this movie like a half hour into it.
33 minutes.
Yeah, another convention-shattering thing. The lead of your movie shows up in the second act. It's not just that like she's the smartest person in the room. It's that she's the person who has humanity in this film. Her and her husband Norm, you know, the painter of ducks. Without the two of them, without her character, I think that this film would just be, you know, as Roger Ebert put it, in cold blood, but with comedy. But with her, it ascends to something even greater. And I always think about, it's not the last scene of the movie, but it's close to it, where she's got Peter Stormare in the back of her squad car. She's witnessed one of the most horrifying things you could possibly imagine, you know, stuffing a leg into a wood chipper. And she's just talking about all the people that he's killed, all the people who, you know, all the lives that were ruined. And for what? For a little bit of money. There's more to life than just a little bit of money. Don't you know that? Here you are, and it's a beautiful day. It makes me want to cry thinking about it. And it really sums up the driving theme of the Coen Brothers work in such a beautiful way, is that like people get so concerned with these petty things that don't matter. They ruin their entire lives in the pursuit of financial gain. And they don't take the time to recognize the beauty of the world that they live in, you know, and how wonderful life can be if we're not concerned with those things. It's, you know, to have that in the center of this movie that is so grim and so dark, so absurd and so funny, I think is really something special.
Yeah.
And that's why it's my number one.
Yeah. No,
And Marge and Norm are relationship goals.
Yeah, I
are.
I was gonna say that as just my final point is when I was rewatching it, I rewatched it again today, and I just found that the Coen Brothers duality of the two marriages in the film are, you know, you have one that is essentially like using the other one. It's very empty, it's very hollow, very materialistic, obviously for this money, because Jerry's so selfish and probably one of the biggest cinematic idiots we've ever had in the history of celluloid. And then you have, when Marge comes in and she gets the call, you have, you know, you have Norm essentially be like, oh, you should have a breakfast, like the idea of like, I'm gonna make you some eggs, and she goes, no, and then that's little smile that McDormand puts on her face of just being like, okay. And then like them eating together, and he's out of work. Jerry is pretty much like essentially working himself into debt. And yet it's okay that Norm's like that, because she's the one that's in charge of everything and she's keeping it all together. And then, you know, this marriage over here is in tatters, falling apart. There's all this complications, and you can tell that there's something going on over here, and that it's, you know, obviously they're having a child, and it's, you know, there's stuff that's not said, but at the end of it, they look at each other when she gets in the bed and they go, 2 more months. And there's like a calmness to all of it by the end of it too. There's all this murder and there's blood. There is also this just relationship dynamic of like, it's not, marriage is not easy and it's not perfect. And yet just breathing and just thinking about it could be far worse. You know, you're talking about, oh, it could just be a little bit of money. Or, I mean, she literally goes and meets this guy and it almost turns into like this really creepy, you know, sort of exchange. And I love Francis's response of like, no, you sit over there. Like, sit over there. That's like, I don't even know if that was even like written, because that feels very just Frances McDormand. Most of, you know, like, how we know her. Yeah.
Everything about the Coens is written. Yeah.
I know, but like knowing Frances McDormand, it would have been like, yeah, get back over there, because I don't want to turn my neck. And it's like just a great enough excuse, but also it's like too, it's like she doesn't want to be seen like that. This is not this sort of encounter either. She's very devoted to her husband, while Jerry's basically like, I don't care, I got to get out of debt somehow. I'm going to use my wife as a tool to get out of this debt. And it goes deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. So I love all that. But then also too, yes, I mean the absurdity of the comedy too, and Buscemi's performance in here as well. And
should have been nominated.
The $4, I don't want to be in this parking lot. You know, well, there's a minimum fee, and I'm just like, really? You think that uniform gives you some kind of power? It's hilarious. Like it's such good comedic work by Buscemi, another person that works with them a ton. So, all right, that's.
I just want to say,
okay.
Final
Sorry,
note
Josh.
for this is that there is no greater romantic line than "You got Arby's all over me."
There's that, and then
every time
I got them going down the club meal buffet, and there's like chicken this. It's hysterical.
So yeah.
Hysterical. Also, it made me really hungry when I was watching it too. So.
Yeah. Another quick thing about Fargo. One more thing from me. When you mentioned the 2 more months quote, that really stuck out to me, and it always stands out to me when I watch it, because not only is it this like, oh, calming thing, like 2 more months, and it's that, but it's also this sense of, after every Coen Brothers movie, and this is very rare for me with directors, I always get the sense that life goes on for these characters when the movie ends, whether it's a cut to black or one of the final lines of dialogue. You know that there's something else coming for these characters that you're not going to get to see, and you have to be okay with that. But it's sort of one of those things where they can't control what's coming, but something is going to happen to them based on not what they've done previously in the movie, but just life itself. That's what happens. Life goes on. And I think that's a perfect line to describe why I love their ending so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. Well, Sophia, we're kicking it back to you. It's your number 2. So what do you got?
Speaking of endings I love and cut to black, No Country for Old Men is my number 2. I love this movie so much, and I saw it at a very formative age. I was 14 when I watched this. My dad took me to see it, and it was one of those, like, it's on a list of films that just changed my life. I was so overwhelmed by it, and specifically by the ending and how it made me feel and how everything just clicked into place when we are hearing Belle describe this dream that he has, and talking about how he really is, in that moment, and you realize it, one of the old men in the title. He struggles to deal with this world of chaos and randomness around him, and his worldview feels like it was always a dream. And this is just such a subversive film, I think, for the Coens, because it is this neo-Western noir, and we've talked about them loving Westerns and loving noir, but the way that they play with these genre tropes here is so, it's just unlike anything I've seen in many films. And just seeing how they play with modernity in noir, like looking at like the blinds in the motel or the suitcase or the reflections in the TV screen, like these are all things that are very unique to this movie. And I love that, again, that theme of you can't stop what's coming for you, and how this Anton Chigurh character with the Javier Bardem performance is just, I mean, it's incredible. He's one of the scariest characters I've ever seen on film. And I love how here in this film we have what is a very anticlimactic death of a hero, and we have a villain that walks off into the sunset. I think it's brilliant, and I love it so much. I wish it didn't win picture, director, and screenplay. I wish we could have spread it out with There Will Be Blood a little bit, but I love this movie so much. I'm sure other people have it too.
Anybody else
Maybe.
have this on their list?
It's my number 2.
Eric's number 2. Okay. Anybody else?
It is in my top 10, but it is not in my top 5.
Josh Parham. Zach?
I do really like it, though.
Is it your number 2?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was talking over both Erik and Josh.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure. No, but Erik, you first. Why is No Country on your list?
It's really funny. I really should have just had Fargo at number 1 because I had so much more to say about Fargo than I do about my top 2. I don't know why. It is one of the coolest endings for the reason that Sophia mentions, and obviously Javier Bardem is an absurd villain because of that fucking hair.
Hell yeah.
Which you don't take seriously.
That's gonna be your look next month.
Everything he does, you do. And this is a case where his method and mode of dispensing with people is so weird and bizarre.
Oh, it scares me every time I watch it. It's so chilling.
I love it.
Also super scary. And the game that he plays with people in it just is, it will make like the hair in your arms and the back of your neck just stand up, because it's like, is he going to, or is it not? This poor shopkeeper. You're just it's really terrifying. And he's also, Bardem is like those teeth and just like sort of like blanched skin.
Yeah.
He's like not alive. He's not really like human. And I know sometimes, a very human killer can feel like the scariest, but no, this is much scarier.
Yeah.
I love that we talk about this movie almost inextricably with There Will Be Blood because of that year. And both, Paul Thomas Anderson and the Coens had their, biggest Oscar attention and moments with them. And at the same time, different results, obviously.
Yeah.
But I love too that the two movies were shooting close enough to each other to have an impact on each other.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny and cool, but yeah, I guess that's all.
Zach?
Yeah, so much like Sophia, I saw this at a formative time in my life. At that time, I was working at a movie theater in my hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina. Shout out to the Manor Theater, which has now been closed down because of COVID. But they reopened a new art house theater in Charlotte afterwards, all the people who worked there. So it's fine. But this played at it was a 2-screen art house theater that I worked at throughout all of my high school and college years. And this film played for many, many months on one of those 2 screens. And I saw it many, many times. And it was a time in my life where, there were all kinds of great movies coming out. We mentioned There Will Be Blood, but also, things like Zodiac and Diving Bell and the Butterfly and Michael Clayton.
Yeah.
Just
what a year.
I mean, really.
Assassination of Jesse James, Kyle Robert Ford.
Yeah.
Once. I could keep going, but I won't.
And the fact that this movie could have won Best Picture over a movie like There Will Be Blood, which could very well be the best film of that decade, and it not be seen as an embarrassing choice by the Academy, I think speaks to how good this film is. But both of those films are examples of great American filmmaking in its purest form. Just the possibilities of what can be done. With There Will Be Blood, it's like what you can do with an epic and with ambition and the kind of like the fever dream of making something that's like a Apocalypse Now or 2001, something that really tests the boundaries of storytelling. And with this one, it's like, what can you do within genre to make a film that is much deeper than it appears on the surface? I had read the book before I saw this movie, and I thought, well, it's a shame that they won't be able to do the ending the way that it is. And I remember seeing it for the first time. I saw it with the day that it opened, right before I had to go on my shift at work. And I was shocked when I realized that, like, oh, wow, they're going to actually do it the way that it was written.
Yep.
And I always think about that scene towards the end where Bardem, Anton Chigurh, gets into the car wreck.
Yeah.
And his arm is broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's like unstoppable evil taken down by a random act, just like, a normal car accident. That's all it took to stop this unstoppable force.
Momentarily.
Yeah. As he just walks off and continues onward.
Insane.
And the same, I got chills. I get chills thinking about the last scene with Tommy Lee Jones. The first time it cut to black and like, hearing this packed crowd of, Friday matinee goers, huh? Like, I was like, oh shit, they really did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember seeing this in 2007. I was in high school, and I was so looking forward to it because, obviously knew the Coen Brothers, and I had recently just seen There Will Be Blood, which is still my favorite film of that year, of that decade, one of my favorite films of all time. But this was just like, this is a different experience than that, and and it is a masterpiece in its own right. And this movie is wildly funny to me because of that whole thing that the Coen Brothers have, which is this very specific details that they add about the small sort of Texas towns and language and the use of the border and all these different things, using of this area in particular. And I think of the obviously one of the most iconic scenes of the film, the coin flip scene. That is hysterical to me. Just the responses from that old man and Bardem getting choked up like you married into it and all that stuff. And it is back to that. It's what you were saying earlier, Josh. It's very funny for a minute, but then this man's not taking into account that this is literally walking death in front of him, and that this coin flip is essentially for his life, and you've been putting it up for your entire life. You just didn't know it. And there's just so many wonderful lines that they are able to lift from this really great novel from a wonderful, Cormac McCarthy, who I love McCarthy's work. And it just was like the perfect marriage of their sensibilities with this dark twist about, that has every biblical element you could have in it, the sense of good and an unstoppable evil, and that there's questions still to be had, but there's details enough in which every time you watch it, it kind of answers them themselves. I think also the shootout sequence at the hotel is extraordinarily shot and also choreographed and put together so well. As much as we talk about Javier Bardem, who is more than deserving of his Oscar, Josh Brolin is extraordinary in this film and gave him the career renaissance that he needed to then, become more than what he was at the time. And yes, Tommy Lee Jones is great in this movie. That final scene, I just remember my crying, my mouth was on the floor. It's also a very personal film for me too, because one of my cousins, I saw it with him, and it was the last film that I saw with him before a couple weeks later, before he died. And it was that those scenes are at the end of this man talking about regrets and a legacy and what it all means. And then to have somebody like that taken so short, and then it's coming from words from somebody that's lived a full life, or pretty much a full life, is retired, and the mundanity of now having to fill their time. I find that so fascinating. And you're right, it's very anticlimactic. You think you're going to get this massive shootout between them, and then it's not the case, because that's not how life is. It's not all the final showdown at the end. And yes, it's one of those where, thank God that the Academy was smart enough to see a movie like this, or even nominate a movie like this, and for have it to win. I agree with Sophia. Would have loved Paul Thomas Anderson to have something, for God's sakes, because they're both.
I'd have given him director.
I would have given him director too, and I would have
yeah.
kept the screenplay here. But also too, they are so tied together for history purposes. Because like Erik, you were saying, they were shooting so close to one another. It was almost like a Beatles Rolling Stones sort of thing. I'm like, you're doing this hit and I'm doing this, and we're just going back and forth. And that is very much this American epic, and this is more of this small but yet grand ideaed fable to almost biblical proportions. And even like Woody Harrelson's in this for a couple of minutes. Stephen Root, who's another small
Love
component
Stephen
of
Root in
he's
anything.
so good in it. The I don't know. Do you see me? Things like that. Like it's just little lines in this movie. And then Kelly MacDonald, the actress who plays her mother in this, freaking hilarious. Who is it? Who is it?
Beth Grant.
She's incredible. Like, I don't know why we got to go all the way out here to El Paso. Very much like Erik before I knew him.
That sound many.
Yeah.
Beth Grant is a legend and an icon.
Yes. And so ultimately, just like a movie that it's one that I watch way too many times. I laugh way too much because of its specificity, because even like Tommy Lee Jones, when they're investigating the shootout and, oh, sheriff, he was just here. You know what I mean? Like there's just things and then just like, that is literally how people sound down here and how they act. And it's those things that make the Coen Brothers movies so unique. You know what I mean? And I absolutely love this movie, and it's one of the greatest Best Picture winners of all time, but it's not my number one.
It's not in my top 5. It's sitting just outside of it. But I will also say that for me, ironically, some of the Oscars that it didn't win, I actually think are some of the most deserving
Like head
things about
scratching.
it.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think the editing and sound design of this movie is just immaculate. And it's so funny to compare it against what did win those categories that year, The Bourne Ultimatum, which is just on the complete opposite end, where the movie has so many cuts and is very loud, and No Country is so quiet and meticulously paced, but so effective in drawing you into this world. And I think that it is just incredible work from the editing and sound design perspective in that film.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. Well, Josh, we're at your number 2, but I feel like your number 2 is going to be a lot of our number 1s. I got a feeling about that.
I mean, if it hasn't been said yet, I'm hoping that is the reason why.
I think that's why.
But
number 1s. Josh, your number 2?
My number 2 is Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Yeah, this movie is just, it is yet another masterpiece from them. And it's another meditation on creativity and where you stand in that. But it is so much more dark and bleaker than you would kind of want. But at the same time, it feels so much realer because of that. And it feels like a real, genuine examination about what it takes to kind of quote unquote make it, and whether or not you actually want that as an artist, and what you would have to give up, and whether or not that's something that you actually do. And I like that it doesn't really provide us with the easy answers to it. I think that Llewyn Davis is a very unlikable person, but you understand that he's a great artist. But the movie is very smart at showing us that sometimes having talent isn't enough. Sometimes it is, you got to be a good person too. Sometimes it's just also plain luck. One of my favorite moments is towards the end of that movie when he gives that very soulful performance, which really is sort of the culmination of his entire arc about kind of finding his own unique voice, where he doesn't have his partner anymore and he kind of completes it. And in a normal movie, that would be when we would get to the part of like, yes, this is the moment where he's made it and it's going to be great from here on out.
He's the biggest star in the world.
Yeah, right? And probably would happen if it were not that Bob Dylan plays right after him and changes the course of music history. So, and it's like, it's so sad, but also so real at the same time. And I wouldn't trust too many other people that weren't the Coens to deliver that in a way that felt sincere at the same time. And then when you build all of that around this just magnificent performance from Oscar Isaac, I mean, everybody in the movie is great, but to have him anchor it with that melancholy, but still be captivating and charming at the same time, like, it's very hard to pull off, but he does it beautifully. And yeah, I just love what this movie has to say about the journey of an artist. And sometimes that's filled with some good, but actually a lot of bad. And it doesn't shy away from that either, but still kind of makes the bad beautiful in a way. And that's just something that I think the Coens are so good at. And yeah, it's an incredible movie.
Yeah, it's my number 1. Sophia, is it your number 1? Erik,
it is my number 1.
It's not your number 1, is it?
No, it's not in my top.
Wow, that's rude. Anyway, okay, goodbye. We don't have to talk to you. No. We don't want to hear from you. It's Sophia's turn to speak. Sophia, why is this your number 1?
Thank you. This is my number 1 because when I saw it, I was just completely knocked out by it. The day that I saw it, when I was in college, the weather was exactly the same as it is in this movie. It was a disgusting gray day outside, and I couldn't believe really what I had just experienced. I think, simply put, in its simplest form, it is a snapshot of the Greenwich Village folk scene right before Bob Dylan arrives. And through that setting, the Coens try to tell a story that's all about transition, individual transitions in art and music more broadly. And the Coens love folk tales and tall tales and mythology, and they're perfectly suited to tell this story in this way, where we can keep going through the motions, trying to figure out our life, stuck in the same loop, per se. And ultimately, it takes something great and physical and ugly sometimes and painful to knock us out of that loop and we can't get back in once we're knocked out of that loop. And sometimes that's a blessing, other times it's a curse, but that's part of life. And you have to forge a completely different path and then realize that maybe the path that you were on wasn't right in the first place. And sometimes, even more painful than that, it's, all about being in the right place at the right time, like Dylan was. And I also find something really beautiful in the cat in this movie. I mean, I am a cat person, but I love the idea of this cat and how that plays into the folklore of it. And, is this cat Lewin? And we don't know the answers. And I love not knowing those answers. And I think there's also something really beautiful in what it's saying about duos. The Coens, they're a duo. And in this film, Lewin loses his partner. And he has to think, like, what can I do without my partner? How can I go on? And I sort of started to think about, when I watch it, how do the Coen brothers feel without the other? It's sort of like they're thinking of, like, what will I do without you? How will I, journey on creatively if I lose you, when I lose you one day, right?
Yeah.
And just to wrap up, because I've talked a lot about this movie because I do love it so much, but I really think that the Llewyn Davis character ties in really well with Sheriff Bell from No Country for Old Men, and how you think of that character as one of these, like, good men of the past, or a person who was sort of at the right place, not at the wrong place at the wrong time, sort of, and how everything is moving forward into this new territory, and how that ending shocked so many people because they didn't know what to make of it. And it's this dream, but the movie ends with, "And I woke up." That's the final line. And I think here, that's effectively what happens at the end of Inside Llewyn Davis. He wakes up. He's out of that continuous loop he's been going through, and that's it.
Yeah. This is my number one. Not even close. I love this movie. I remember seeing it in theaters, and it's funny. This is a funny story. I saw it with my dad, and we walked out, and I really loved it. And I saw this, like, this old lady walked up to the rabbit, and she's goes, "What do you think?" She's like, "I didn't like it." And I yelled right back in that lady's ear and at the rest face, "Best movie of the year. Don't listen to her." And I walked out of that. Out of the theater.
That was me, Ryan.
I know it was. I said, "Get out of the way, bitch." Anyway, but no, I just think that everything that Sophia and Josh have said is absolutely true. Like, this is like a star in the making performance from Oscar Isaac. I think that this, to me, is the best performance on the male side, at least, that the Coen brothers have ever gotten, because for me, there's just a lot to root for Llewyn, but yet there's also so much to root against. He at every turn, you're just like, I'm so sick of this guy, but then you can't help but fall back in love with him because you want him to finally get there, because every artist deserves to at least try, because they're putting their heart and soul into it, to get to that point. And I think a lot about little things in this movie for me. I think about when he stays with Adam Driver's Al Cody, and he has to move his records under the couch, but there's Al Cody's records under the couch as well, and that they're all kind of struggling in right before, like you're mentioning, Josh and Sophia, this era that then comes and really sweeps the entire world with the folk rock genre, and right before Dylan kind of just exploded it for everyone. And I think of two, we talked about the Coens and making choices and everything, between this and No Country for Old Men and A Serious Man. I think they're internalizing a little bit more as creative artists, their creative choices and their characters' decisions, and what that truly means, and the existential dread that comes with this. And also the fact that this is a whole movie about, essentially, like Sophia said, somebody losing their partner, and not having a place to go, and them not being able to grieve this properly, be able to realize that each of their mistakes have consequences that goes into it. Ties in perfectly, I think, too, with A Serious Man. But then, I mean, there are moments of just pure heartbreaking devastation choices that Llewyn makes. He makes this big grand gesture as well, too. Josh, you talked about that final performance, but he goes all the way to Chicago, and he goes and sits in front of F. Murray Abraham. And you would think that this is the moment he's going to sing this beautiful song this beautiful song, and it's a devastating song, but it's beautiful. And Isaac plays it right there on camera, doesn't cut, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful. And it's like, oh my God, he's going to be it. And then what's the line that F. Murray Abraham says? I don't see a lot of money here. And
not very subtle from the Coens in that moment. I will
not very subtle. But then the next lines are, I could, he's trying to tell him, I could maybe put you in a piece or something like, and then he says like something along the lines of, do you used to be in a group? And he goes, yeah, I used to be a duo. And he goes, you should go back to that. You should reconnect, essentially. And then it leads to, I think, the scene that I love so much is because throughout their interactions throughout the film, it's been sort of like, fuck you, and like, you're a piece of shit from Carey Mulligan, who's perfect in this movie. And it's that meme that we all use now, but it means a lot in the movie, where it's just Lewin being like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of continuously having to go above and beyond for my art, and it's not working out for me. And I can go play the same place. I can play the Matterhorn anytime I want. I can go play this clubs anytime I want, but it's not doing anything. And yeah, he gets beat up at the end. I think it's a little bit like, like Sophia said earlier about Fargo, life goes on for Lewin. You kind of, I think, though, here see as like with Dylan on the Rise, he might have a shot, but then also too, he's pissed off. He's pissed off every person in the world. So at this point, where's his place in all of it? I still think like the vicious circle will continue with him, because he'll probably be in the back of the bar like he is, complaining about Bob Dylan being like, oh, times they're not a changing. What the hell are you talking about, dude? So it's just a beautiful piece. And I mean, the collaboration here with T-Bone Burnett, I'm going to say something controversial. I'm not the biggest fan of Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and I much prefer this kind of, collaboration that they had, and this attention to detail, production design, Bruno Devanel's really great cinematography that goes along with this too. The Coen brothers editing this movie as well. And also one of their funniest moments that they've ever had in the film, Please Mr. Kennedy. It's the only time Justin Timberlake's been good on screen. So yeah. Inside Llewyn Davis.
I like the cat.
Yeah.
The cat's great.
And
I had to pick the Adam Driver movie.
Shut your mouth, Erik.
No, honestly, my relationship with this movie is, when I first saw it, I like really almost aggressively disliked it. Even though it had all of the hallmarks and bones of a Coen Brothers story. Every single bit of it was a Coen Brothers story. I think at the time, I let the distraction of Delbonnel's cinematography, which I do feel like was such a turn for them visually, I let it kind of like overtake like my thoughts about it, because I've watched it many times since and really, really enjoyed it. Although, I mean, yes, Ulysses watching through the subway window is easily my favorite part, period.
Oh yeah. When he's absolutely on the one.
It's just such a dreamy like moment of nothing bad is happening at all. It's so pure. But
love how they show the cat's face, Ulysses' face, in the window, like he's on Lewin's shoulder, like it's his head. I think it's really cool.
It's gorgeous. But I really do like it now a lot. Yeah, so I think I just let like one aspect like overrule in that moment.
Oh, so yeah, okay.
So yeah, see, sometimes when you revisit things, you can change your mind, and things are different.
Or maybe you just had it right the first time. Anyway,
sometimes
Zach,
people grow.
This was the hardest one for me to not have in my top 5, because I think it is a really great film, and it does deserve to be talked about as one of their very best. I saw this movie for the first time after having lived in Los Angeles for a year, and was trying to like get any kind of work in film, both making films and writing about films. And I was just like periodically making money off of writing or being on set, and also working at 2 different movie theaters. And I think that like so it hit me pretty hard seeing this movie about a guy who is like struggling to become an artist and like it never happening for them. The older I get, the more this movie does resonate with me, because I don't know if it's about necessarily like talent not being enough. It's like, what if you're just not talent? You have talent, but it's just not good enough. It's not that next level of talent.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like you're on the surface level, or you're right close to it, but you can't reach it.
It's almost like, it's really interesting casting F. Murray Abraham in this movie, because his most identifiable role is of a man who has a great appreciation for music, but just doesn't have that next level, the subliminal talent, where it's like you don't really have to think about it too hard. It just comes naturally to you. Like that is what separates Llewyn Davis from somebody like a Bob Dylan, right?
Yeah.
It's just, for Dylan, it comes easy because he's touched with genius.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this movie really resonates with me. Is it's not just about like, a guy who's like, God, if only the world would give me a chance, it's like, it's about a guy who like, not only might not have what it takes, but burns every single bridge in the process.
Yeah.
To like, maybe just like make some semblance of a living in music, like he has enough talent that he could very easily like, get a record or something, like play in a band.
Yeah.
But
he signs away the royalties, of that song. Like I love that moment, because like that would be the break. But he is so
focused like it's gonna make millions.
Yeah, and he's so focused on the now and his immediate problems that he has created for himself that he can't even enjoy the royalties of this like dumb song that he knows he doesn't like, but would be a good gig. But he can't. He has so many problems in the moment. He can't even enjoy that bit that would be a good break for him.
Yeah. It's just a great movie. Shame that Erik didn't put it in his top 5. So I'm just kidding. Erik,
wait,
you're the last one.
Only one with the number one.
You're the last person to speak as you kind of plan this out.
That is not true. I know you will. I know you will step on that.
Well, we're about to mute your number one pick. So
my number one is the same number one actually that it's been for 25 years, I think. Okay. And that is Miller's Crossing.
Oh, okay. I like this.
I love Roger Deakins, obviously. But the Barry Sonnenfeld shot era of the Coens is something I really, really love. I think this is, it's probably their coldest and darkest and least humorous movie. I don't want to say that it's mean or mean-spirited, but it is pretty savage. But it is kind of what makes it a perfect noir. It's because it is so kind of relentlessly dark and dour. It's also their queerest movie, because this is a gay movie. You can't and don't really say it, but this is a gay movie. Not just John Turturro, but the triangle that is happening there is unexplicitly gay, but also kind of done in the way that you would have had to do it in the 40s if you were trying to sort of just use subtext for everything. I think John Turturro is extraordinary in this. I think everybody is. Love baby Marcia Gay Harden in this. I hate that I'm alone on this. Because I don't know. I just
it's great, but it's tough. You got to make tough decisions.
You got to make tough decisions.
It's a good movie. I feel stubborn in having it and keeping it at my number one for this long, because
I love that it's your number one.
So many other
makes
things
it unique.
I do too.
So many other things.
Yeah.
But
You're the only one that has it. That's great.
This stands outside of so much of their history as filmmakers.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Something I was thinking about in our earlier conversation about Lebowski, that, you know, you could go from some type of either financial success or Oscar success and like jump to something that might not really be like what you're used to. And what we have now in that is like, you know, an indie filmmaker will make their first film and like immediately then they get scooped up for like a Marvel movie or something that is so absolutely bigger and grander than what they're used to, what their fans are used to. So the rumor of them possibly doing the Batman movie is one of those things that
I would
is
pay
like,
money to see that.
I'm so glad that it never ever happened, because the trajectory of their careers would have been like permanently altered, and you know, we wouldn't have gotten Miller's Crossing.
They would have made Wednesday.
Please no.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one of my favorite noirs of all time. And again, on reusing, you know, people to extraordinary effect. John Turturro, oh my god.
Yeah.
Should have been Oscar.
Albert Finney,
yeah.
Finney's
Albert
great.
Finney, oh my god. Yeah.
It's got my guy Gabriel Byrne in it. Love Byrne.
Gabriel Byrne. It's great.
Yeah.
And really hot.
The first time he got killed in a Coen Brothers movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my god.
Is this also the one that has the Sam Raimi cameo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Raimi's
So
in
yeah,
there.
their relationship early on is just so fantastic.
Frances in there for like a quick second, if you remember too.
Yeah.
She's like a secretary in there.
John Polito.
Yeah.
Oh, John Polito. How did we not mention him during Lebowski?
That's one of the things that's so fascinating about the gay element of this, because John Polito and Michael Jeter are both in it. They are gay actors, but they're I think a lot of times this is a movie that does get revisited and it gets regarded as more problematic, and I very rarely give shits about what people find problematic about something from 30 years ago. It's if you're only looking at things in a 2023 lens, oh my god, touch some grass.
And also too, the movie, a lot of people are starting to see it now more often because it did get in the Criterion collection. It's a Criterion release recently.
Absolutely, and I think if you're obviously
in Blood Simple
fans, if you're fans of the Coen Brothers, you're going to work your way backwards anyway, or whatever process you use to kind of fill out watching a director's entire list. And they don't have like that many. It's not that difficult to do.
No, they only have 18 films. You can knock that out on a weekend. You know, it's like one season of Stranger Things.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So there you go.
How about shorter?
It's probably like that last season's still going.
Miller's Crossing.
Love that pick. So let's just run them down real quick again. Sophia, your top 5 real quick.
Yeah, so my top 5 in reverse order. My number 5 is Barton Fink. Number 4, A Serious Man. 3, Fargo. 2, No Country for Old Men. And 1, Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yep. Josh?
Number 5 is True Grit. 4 is Barton Fink. 3, A Serious Man. 2, Inside Llewyn Davis, and 1, Fargo.
Zachary?
Number 5, Blood Simple. Number 4, Barton Fink. Number 3, The Big Lebowski. Number 2, No Country for Old Men. Number 1, Fargo. And may I just say for Erik, I love that Miller's Crossing pick. It's a movie that's very near and dear to my heart because I met one of my very best friends my first day of film school. We were sitting in the cafeteria and I was quoting the scene where John Polito is talking about why you shave with cold water. And he quoted the rest of that line back to me.
And a friendship was born.
My friend Michael Fry, who's been my friend for 15 years now. We used to live together. So Inside Llewyn Davis together. I was at his wedding. So Miller's Crossing, it brings people together.
There you go.
I love that.
I love it. Erik?
My 5 was Blood Simple. My 4 was Raising Arizona. My 3 was Fargo. My 2 was No Country for Old Men, and my number 1 was Miller's Crossing.
That's correct. I was also just making.
I didn't
sure
realize it was a
your
test,
memory.
but I'm glad that
I got it all written down here. I was just making sure your memory.
So do
was
I.
still... my number 5 was The Serious Man. My number 4 was The Big Lebowski. Number 3 was Fargo. Number 2 was No Country for Old Men, and my number 1 with a bullet inside Llewyn Davis. Yeah, it's been a long episode. So, Zach, thank you for coming on. Can you tell everybody out there where they can find you and your work, and also tell me, since we talked about favorites, what's your least favorite Coen Brother film? Real quickly, as we're wrapping up.
Killers.
Okay, The Lady Killers. Okay.
Not even hard. You can find me at Zach Laws, ZACHLAWS on. I guess Twitter's still around.
Yeah, unfortunately.
For now, I might still have a blue check mark by the time you.
You never know.
Might not. Letterboxd, Instagram, all that stuff. You can find my work at AwardsWatch now.
Yeah, he's gonna have reviews and stuff coming soon. We're gonna have some good stuff from Zach Laws coming up. Sophia Ciminello, same drill.
My least favorite Coen Brothers movie is The Lady Killers, with intolerable cruelty close behind.
Yep.
And you can find me on Twitter at Sophia_Sim. You can find my podcast, Oscar Wilde. We release episodes every Friday. Our season 4 premiere is this Friday, and we are doing an 80th anniversary episode on Casablanca, one of my favorite Best Picture winners of all time. We recorded it earlier and it was very fun. So definitely check that out at Oscar Wilde Pod on Twitter and Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. And you can find my work also on AwardsWatch. I have a review coming for Beau is Afraid as soon as that embargo lifts.
Yeah, we've seen it, and that's all we're gonna say. That's all we're gonna say. Josh, shame whole shtick.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bring up the chorus on The Lady Killers. It's pretty bad. Although I will say it had a great trailer. I was actually very excited after seeing that trailer. I thought it was very funny, and then the movie, woof, not great.
Yeah,
it's pretty terrible.
I recently saw it again too. Not great.
Yeah, it's a shame because the trailer I do think was really great, but not the end result.
On paper, it would make sense, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, well, when you didn't realize that the Coens didn't intend to direct that movie and they just sort of fell into it, then it makes sense about why that movie's so terrible. But you can also find me on Twitter and Twitter and Letterboxd. I'm not really on Instagram all that much, to be honest. At JR Parham, and you can find my work over on Next Best Picture and at AwardsWatch.
All right, and Erik.
Stop me if you've heard this one before, but yes, The Lady Killers. Although the 1-2 punch of intolerable cruelty and Lady Killers is really horrific, and I'm not a big fan of The Man Who Wasn't There or Oh Brother, so that 4 in a row
either.
Yeah, those are my 4.
Such a low point in, again, what I feel like was 7 movies in a row that are absolutely stupendous. Shout out to Hudsucker Proxy, which could have easily been in my top 5, and I think is
very underrated from them.
So fucking good.
Shout out to Hell Caesar.
For kids. Oh my god. I love it. Yeah. And you can find me at awardswatch.com, at awards_watch on Twitter, AwardsWatch on Instagram, and Letterboxd.
It's clean sweep. Lady Killer sucks. And is the proof that there's always a bad film, at least in a director's great filmography.
They're only bad film.
Yeah, Intolerable Cruelty is one I haven't seen in a long time, but I don't remember being like just mixed on it. Lady Killers is just flat out bad. I will say that. Yeah. And I'm not
even the other ones I'm not a big fan of. I can I can see something in there to sort of appreciate, but there's very little to appreciate with The Lady Killers.
Yeah, I wasn't like over the moon about Buster Scruggs, and I'm like really sad that that's like their last thing that they've done, and I pray to God they can get back together so they can make something great to end on that note. But like, yeah, The Lady Killers is just a bad movie, and awful. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade77. You can follow my work here at AwardsWatch, as well as the playlist and Film Speak and In Session Film, a bunch of other places. Next week, we'll be back. We'll be talking about a movie that I've seen or already got a review up on the website, and that's Ben Affleck's return to the director's chair in Air. And we're going to do our top 5 films based on a true story, loosely based on a true story.
Fargo.
So until then, we will see you all next time.